Questions on galaxies and stars. Base your answers to questions 1 through 4 in the diagram below and on your knowledge of Earth science. The diagram represents two possible sequences in the evolution of stars. So we start off with a cloud of dust and gas called a nebula, develops into a protostar in its early stage. The protostar develops into a main sequence star. Depending upon its mass, whether it's a high mass star or a medium mass star, will determine how it lives out the rest of its life. If it's a high mass star, it will become a supergiant, combines elements as large as iron, then it will explode into a supernova. After a supernova can develop into a black hole, a new nebula, or neutron star. Medium mass stars become giant stars. They burn out their fuel. The size of the star shrinks to become a white dwarf and finally may form a black dwarf. Number 1, which process generates the energy that is released by stars? In our reading, we learned stars through nuclear fusion convert hydrogen fuel into heavier elements, mostly helium. This nuclear reaction will continue for millions of billions of years, generating the star's energy. Number 2, which table includes data that are characteristics of the surface temperature and luminosity of some white dwarfs? From looking at the reference table, we can see that white dwarfs have a temperature of around 10,000 degrees Kelvin and up. The luminosity of white dwarfs is rather low, below 0.01 to 0.0001. Number 3, which property primarily determines whether a giant star or supergiant will form? As we saw on the chart here, the property that determines that will be the mass. Number 4, what causes clouds of dust and gas to form a protostar? Clouds of dust and gas, the nebula, will form a protostar because of the force of gravity. The diagram below represents a side view of the Milky Way galaxy. At approximately which position is Earth's solar system located? The diagram below represents the development of our universe from the time of the Big Bang until the present. Letter A indicates two celestial objects. The present-day celestial objects labeled A are best identified as. Which sequence of stars is listed in order of increasing luminosity? Starting at Polaris, Deneb has a higher luminosity than Polaris, but Eridani B has a lower. Starting at Spica, Rigel is more luminous than Spica. Deneb is more luminous than Rigel, but Betelgeuse is less luminous. Starting at Bernard star, going up to Alpha Centauri, increases in luminosity. Going up to Rigel, increasing luminosity, but Spica is lowering luminosity. Procyon B, the sun would have a higher luminosity. Sirius would have a higher luminosity than the sun, and Betelgeuse would have the highest luminosity. Number 8, the photograph below shows a feature of the universe as seen through a telescope. The feature is best identified as. Number 9, to an observer on Earth, the sun appears brighter than Rigel because the sun is. The symbols represent the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, the sun, and the universe. Which arrangement is most accurate? The sun is a single star. The solar system is made up of the sun and additional planets. The Milky Way is made up of the sun, the planets, and other stars. And the universe is made up of the sun, the solar system, the Milky Way, and all other galaxies. Number 11, which star has a surface temperature most similar to the surface temperature of Alpha Centauri? Betelgeuse would be cooler than Alpha Centauri. Procyon B would be hotter than Alpha Centauri. Polaris would be about the same temperature as Alpha Centauri. Sirius would be hotter than Alpha Centauri. Number 12, the final stage in the life cycle of the most massive stars is. Most massive stars form supergiants, explode into supernovas. Very high mass stars become black holes. High mass stars become neutron stars. Between points 1 and 3, this star is visible to observers on Earth because it emits light energy. This energy is released by the process of nuclear fusion when stars through nuclear fusion convert hydrogen fuel into heavier elements, mostly helium. Number 14, what is a possible surface temperature of the star at point 2? Point 2 is slightly to the left of where the sun is on this chart, probably right about here on this chart. Put the temperature at about 7,000. Life cycle of the sun. The sun begins contracting from a gas cloud, the nebula. 50 million years later, it's on the main sequence, and it remains on the main sequence for 10 billion years. Eventually, the sun expands over the course of 500 million years. The sun expands to a giant size, larger than the orbit of the Earth. After that, the sun's outer layers are blown off by violent pulsations. The sun contracts. 75,000 years goes by. The sun ends as a white dwarf. Number 15, the sun is inferred to spend the greatest amount of time of its life cycle. Number 16, for other stars in our galaxy that go through a similar life cycle to our sun, Which star is currently in the late stages of its life cycle? The late stage of life cycle would be in the white dwarf stage. 40 Eridani b and Procyon b are both stars that are in the late stage of their life cycle. It's mentioned in the reading that stars start off burning hydrogen fuel. During nuclear fusion, hydrogen is converted into helium. Number 18, the Milky Way galaxy is best described as. Number 19, the explosion of a massive star near the end of its life is known as. Number 20, compared to the Sun, the star Betelgeuse is more massive, more luminous, and cooler.